All right, fantastic. Thank you.
All right, sweet. All right, so this is going to be, so we're talking about, so Scribe Online is our integration platform as a service. Cloud app that we're going to work with, log into the UI, that's where you're going to manage ongoing integrations, you're going to create connections into your endpoints. We'll talk a lot more about connectivity and how you get your hooks into there. But also it's going to be where you spend a lot of time doing any kind of troubleshooting or management of the integration ongoing. So over time, if you have different fields you add to Marketo that you want to add to the sync, if you add custom objects in Marketo you want to sync back with Dynamics, you can do all that stuff. You can make changes ongoing through that same UI. Our core Scribe Online cloud platform, you can see in the blue boxes within that cloud, we've got 4 big things that happen in our cloud. Connections, so authentication, bring back metadata, so what objects or tables are there, what fields do we have to work with. Mapping that data, so what does it mean when a lead is added to Marketo? Where does that have to go? What is the workflow it has to follow through? Solutions are going to be groupings of those things. So if I have, I want to use a sales insight solution, so it's going to be interesting moments and certain activities I'm going to funnel into specific areas. Solutions can be scheduled independently, so I could have, that might run every minute, whereas I might have a broader activity sync that runs, once an hour. I might have other lead syncs that happen every 3 minutes. So I can make those different changes. And then execution history, this is going to be what's been happening to the integration lately. So how has it been running? Have there been any errors? Do I have to do anything to manage that? That's kind of the stuff that lives within our cloud is grouped into those big categories. Outside of that, we have the way that we execute integration is through we call them agents. And there's 2 flavors of agents. So there's a cloud agent where if it's Marketo and another cloud app, you can host it completely in Scribe's cloud. It all just happens there automatically. Everything syncs through that, and you don't have to install anything. If you have on-prem data sources, though, so AS400, on-prem CRM, text files that you want to upload, you can deploy an agent on-premise. So this sits behind your firewall and gives you access to local resources, but doesn't make you make them internet-facing. So you can just basically take a little bit of Scribe's cloud, deploy it locally, and that'll give you those local access points, but it'll still be managed through our cloud interface. The other really cool thing about that is when we process data, that data is processed via that agent. So if I'm connecting an AS400, I've got some really valuable data there, and I want to store it in a Marketo custom object for targeting and personalization. I can make that connection from the on-prem agent, and that data is routed through that on-prem agent. So the data itself doesn't go back up to our main central cloud for any reason. It's always managed and maintained through that agent level. So it's a nice, easy way to have a little more security. It's got a lot of wizard-based deployment options, so it doesn't take a lot of IT oversight to get it to work. And it also allows it so that it only creates outbound connections. So we're never poking a hole back in to say, push this record back to the agent. The agent is always maintaining an outbound connection back to our cloud and will pull down whatever it knows that it needs at the point in time.
Okay.
So just a high-level architecture review, like I said, I don't want to spend too much time there because there's more nuanced details we can get into, but it's really just kind of where the different components reside, and then get into the good stuff of our demo here. So let's jump in here. This is what you're seeing. This is Scribe Online. So a couple of cool things about Scribe Online. When you log in as a named user. So could be Harvey, could be Doug, could be Brendan. When I've logged in, I've got access to my company. So this time I'm talking about Sunshine State Outfitters. Sunshine State has a bunch of integrations, some agents, and different connections that I'm being used with. So it's great because I can see all these different components here. I can kind of navigate through this. One of the really nice things about the way Scribe works is that my user has access to Sunshine State, but I also have access to lots of other things. So if I scroll down this list, I can see I've got access to Bay State, Granite State, all these different organizations. This can be different environments. So you mentioned you have, Sandbox for CRM and for Marketo. You could have the same thing. You could have a production Scribe Online instance, but also a dev Scribe Online instance. You can navigate between the two, and they've got different sets of information that are there, so you can kind of see really quickly the number of integrations, the way things are working, and that navigation happens pretty quickly. So you can carve off tenants that way, where you can have dev, test, prod, UAT. You can have it for different departments. So if other areas of the business want to add on integration, but they want them isolated from the other areas, you can do that with that kind of tenant structure. From a user standpoint, users are going to have access to those orgs that can have multiple people with access into that individual organization. So again, kind of like if you think about from your IT standpoint, IT can own and control all of the integration, and they can spin up these tenants for other individuals and add those people in. These individuals will only ever see the org you've added them to. So if I only want my developers in my dev org, I can give them access to that, and then IT will be the only ones who have access to production. They'll be in charge of moving those integration tasks from dev to production using your own internal processes. So it's really nice that there's a lot of this kind of multi-tenant, multi-user aspect. The other thing here is that your Marketo team can get brought in to give you a hand with the Marketo piece, and once they're done, you can just come in here and you can kick them out. So you can add and remove people really easily, and they won't have access to those integrations any longer. So try to make it a little more of a collaborative model going forward.
Mm-hmm.
So back here, we kind of break integration into three major areas, and it's a little simplified, but hopefully it does help kind of make sense of it all. The first thing is just connections. What are you authenticating with? When you look at a connection, each one's going to have a little different flavor. So if I see something like a Dynamics, it's going to ask me, is it online, on-prem, or IFD? Who are you? Where are you connecting with? And what extra things do you want to do? So what you're going to do is you're going to authenticate as some named user. That connection is going to be running under that user context. So if that user only has access to 3 objects, you'll only have access to those 3 objects through the integration. If you give it sysadmin, it gets you everything. So it's going to have another level of security within those connections to give you the ability to only dole out access to what you need. Each connection is going to be a little bit different. So Marketo is going to be just of 3 things: ID, secret, and a URI. Each connector, the goal of it is this authentication piece. So, handshake with that endpoint, let them know who I am and what I'm trying to do, and then let it bring back metadata. So bring back tables and objects, things like leads, contacts, campaigns. Show me that inside the UI. What they also do is they abstract all the technologies. So our Dynamics connection is a SOAP endpoint. Marketo is REST. I have things here like MySQL, which is a different technology we're going to use to connect with. You don't have to understand the nuances of how those technologies work. You just have to have the ability to authenticate with that, and then it will do the translation. It'll figure out all the details and bring you back in our UI, which you'll see in the mapping utility, just a really standard set of operations and objects that you can deal with. So it makes it a little bit easier to deal with those different technologies that you have within the enterprise. Agents are just going to be where the integration runs. So I have cloud or on-prem. I can have as many agents as I want. So if I want to have them distributed on different servers, I can do that. There are Windows service under the covers. So anywhere you have a Windows OS, you can drop these guys down, and they can maintain and run the integration. You can move them around. You can dispose of them. They're about 20 meg for an install, so they're pretty lightweight. But they're really going to be the powerhouse of where this integration is going to execute. And then solutions are going to be really the meat in between. So this is going to be where you're going to tell those systems how you want the data to transfer, what do you want it to look like in the target system, how you want to extract it from that source system. So we'll spend a bit of time here talking about these different solutions. Any quick questions so far? Anything about just what you've seen? I know it's not much yet, but just want to pause for a second.
Nope, good from my side.
Okay. All right, so let's dive into our CRM Marketo integration. So you can see here a couple of things. So this is going to be my one-stop shopping kind of location for this solution. Solution is going to be a set of groups tasks. So here I'm moving Marketo leads and CRM activities between these 2 systems. I can see I can add some more details, so I can give it a name here. I can give it more descriptive text. I can schedule this, so I can have this thing running anywhere from once a day, certain days of the week, certain days of the month, or every day, every 5, 3, 2 minutes, whatever I want it to be. So I can define that schedule here and how to just execute and run that on that schedule in perpetuity. What it's going to do is going to run these integrations. I can see here that I've got a couple integrations, I've got some connections that are being used, and then I've got the most recent execution history, so how things have been running lately. So you can see all of this in one place. The goal is that you set up these integrations once, they should be running for a whole hell of a lot longer than it took you to design them. So making it easier to make that ongoing kind of care and feeding of the integration easier, where I've got one place to look and I can see at a glance, okay, I've got green checks, everything's looking pretty good, so I'm good to go. When you start to create integrations, you get two manners of ways to kind of get started. You can create something from scratch, so I can create a brand new integration map. I can also import maps. So this is really important because if I've done the work where I've built out a baseline integration between Dynamics and Marketo, I can import that map with all the basic logic and then just customize it to meet my specific needs. So when you think about going from sandbox to production, I can create all my integrations in sandbox and then import them into my production environment because I've done all the basic work. And it just brings in all that mapping. If I have to clean up certain things, if field names have changed or I want to change slightly the formulas that are being used, I can do that, but I don't have to start from scratch every single time.
Is there a starting template for that map, or that will be created once, if we create the sandbox, Marketo sandbox to our sandbox integration, then you can export that map, basically, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, you've got both options. We do have some samples around Dynamics and Marketo. They're very, I guess I'd call them, they're custom. They're very custom to how Scribe has done some things in the past. So we can provide those to give you more of a blueprint around how you want the integration to look, just because if you've never done some of these integrations with these apps before, it's good to have something to refer against. But most of the time, people are generally creating it for your specific use case because, we might map every field. You really only care about 5 fields. So we want to make sure it's a little easier to build it to spec. And then, like you said, once you build it to spec in Sandbox, you can take that and put it into production, and now you're good to go.
Okay.
So I'll build a blank one just to kind of show you the process. So we'll call this a test. Our palette kind of starts off blank, and then I'm going to add connections into it. So I'm going to use a CRM connection, and I'm going to say, in this case, I want to query CRM. I want to pull some account data out. Now, from CRM, you can see we pull back everything. So every object that's in CRM, both standard and custom, will come back from this in this UI. So I can grab, really, again, if I want to use a custom object, I can do that. If I want to use these standard ones, I can do that as well. For the account, what I want to do is I want to make sure I don't want to just grab every account every time. So I can say I really only care about accounts that have been modified since the last time I ran the integration. So I can start to add in logic there. I can add in additional filters and say, I also really only care if the account number is not equal to null. So I want things that have an account number for whatever. This could be whatever fields you want. So I can start to build in this logic to give me just the set of records I care about from CRM, from Marketo, from wherever. Once I know what I want to read out, I can then grab that Marketo instance and say I'm going to use these set of operations. So again, the really nice thing about what we're doing here in Scribe is these connectors. This top part's soap, this bottom part's rest. Doesn't really matter. You basically have the same set of verbs where I want to query for everything I get. I then want to upsert. So I have really basic operations. There's a lot of nuance and detail that happens behind the scenes where you don't have to get exposed to that. You don't need to care about what the technology is. You just need to know that in this case, I want to have that go and upsert some leads within Marketo. So once I set up that basic structure,
between upsert and update.
It's depending on the API. So Marketo has actually pretty great API for some of this, where an update's going to say, I'm going to give it an ID, so I know what my email address is for this lead, and I'm going to go just update that one and only one lead. Mm-hmm. Upsert will say, I'm going to give you that email address. If you find it, go update that record. If you don't find, brendan.peterson@scribesoft.com, create the lead for me. So I don't have to add extra logic in this layer. I can have it just do it automatically through the API.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, not all APIs have this. Marketo and Dynamics both happen to have it, but you'll see, like, if you look at a database, you won't have that kind of stuff. We try to expose when we have those different API functions. We bring it back inside the Scribe UI. So things like upsert. Marketo has the ability to do adds and removes from lists. So there's these different capabilities that will show up from the APIs that you can then leverage inside your data mapping. But again, not every API is equal.
Okay, gotcha.
So then here is go ahead and I've got my objects. And now what I want to do is I want to kind of teach it what it's supposed to do. So I've got, here's my account field to my left. Here's my Marketo lead field to my right. And I start to map data. And I can say, okay, from CRM, I've got my address line 1. And I want to map that. I can map that over to my address information. I can then come in here and I can apply other logic if I want to. So I can go through and say, I want to concatenate that with some different details from my source. So maybe I want that with my address ID instead. The cool thing is, as I go through this, I can start to build out, this is really a data level function. So I can start to build out cleans and concatenates. If I come through this and I say, yep, I want this to be tied together, we have validation built in where it'll come back and tell me if I've done things right or wrong. In this case, I can say, okay, there's something weird. It doesn't expect that. Oh, by the way, I forgot to put in my concatenate function. So I revalidate and things will come back clean. So we do try to give you kind of tips and tricks, little pointers along the way to make it easier to build out these integrations. We'll also give you things like this where it tells you, I haven't put in certain formulas. When I validate, those things start to go away and I get check marks. So we try to make it a little bit easier to design these integrations. If you haven't integrated these systems before, we tell you what fields are required. We tell you some specifics from those different endpoints to get you the information you need while you're doing this, so you don't always have to come back and forth. Let's cancel out of there. So that kind of mapping utility, you can map one-to-one, so that with CRM to Marketo, I can map one-to-many. That could be AS400, putting data into CRM and Marketo at the same time. You can have multiple connections inside one of those maps. It's really going to be picking whatever solution it is for the business problem you're trying to address. If I were to think about bringing data back from Marketo, so thinking about your use case around like activity data. So in this case, I'm doing it the opposite. I'm taking activities from CRM and I'm feeding into a custom object in Marketo, but I could spin this around on its head and say, I want to pull back on the Marketo side. We've got access through their API to tons of different type of data. So it's not just leads and custom objects. It's all, add to case, add to list, add to custom object, change nurture cadence. So all those different activities that can occur in Marketo are exposed via this connector and via the API, and I can pick and choose what I want to do with that. I might have certain times where, like for sales insight, we may need to grab most of these things and bring them down to CRM, so we can have jobs that do that. But you might have other times where if you have an interesting moment occur of a specific type, you want to put that into a CRM queue for sales and marketing to follow up on immediately. So I can pick and choose what things might be more important and extract them from that basic sync in order to kind of give me that custom use case that I need. Everything always shows up in this UI in the same way. So it really, once you know how to build one thing, you could build anything inside of here. There's no real tie to having to understand any of the nuances there. It's really going to be, this is the type of data I care about. This is where it needs to go. Draggy droppy, few mapping of fields, and you've got that basic sync built. Any questions so far about either the utility so far, things you've seen, or some specifics around what you're going to be looking to do with Marketo, things that maybe you think we haven't hit upon that you might be able to accomplish using the different metadata that we've got and the tools on hand?
Just that last one we just looked at, which was interesting moment. So that's part of the sales insights, correct?
Yeah, they bring in interesting moments and they show it in there with those the fireballs and the stars, the different plugin that you've got there.
Okay.
But have you used Marketo a bit in the past?
No.
So interesting moments are interesting. When you create them in Marketo, there's some cool stuff you can do. So if I have, let's say, an interesting moment, they're really dynamic. So I can say this is a milestone that occurred, but I can put whatever I want in here. I can add all sorts of certain tags, all sorts of other things. So they're really more of an abstract. The nice thing about that is because we have access to the data itself, when I bring an interesting moment over, if it's a certain type of interesting moment, so if it's one where the header is like, this is awesome thing, and then other stuff underneath, I can then use Scribe to grab it because it has this value in it and do some other set of actions, whether it's within Dynamics, whether it's outside of Dynamics, and I want to just trigger off other workflows. This is where you can take that sales insight type of stream and then take a tributary off that stream. You can take a left-hand turn and do something else with that data. The insight piece, sales insight's great for visualization, but it doesn't provide much action. This is a way within the Scribe piece, you can create actions upon these things that are happening and have it automatically trigger off a workflow, create a follow-up task, and do all sorts of cool stuff because you've got access to the data as it's being processed.
Gotcha.
The other really neat thing with what we've got, so these integrations you saw, like I built the query, I said only give me things since the last time I checked. That's a really kind of straightforward, easy way to do it. We have another flavor of integration, which is going to be our real-time integration. And that's going to be something where we have request reply and message maps. And basically what that is we've built a set of integrations here, which is going to go, this is the video Doug mentioned earlier, where when something happens in Marketo, I want to go and I want to create a campaign, add those individuals that are doing the action to the campaign, create a campaign response. I've got all this set of logic that occurs. So a nice thing, creating leads if they're not there, all sorts of cool stuff. The way I get into this is over here. This is exposed as a REST endpoint. So I built this whole integration, and then I'm saying basically someone has to alert me that it's time to run the integration. So feed me some data. Marketo has webhooks, which allow me to do exactly that. So in this case, right from within Marketo, I can say when these actions occur, automatically trigger the integration over to CRM. So it's not going to be every minute, every 5 minutes, every hour. It's going to be when that happens, go trigger off that integration. It might just be bringing the lead over, or it might be, in this case, adding a lot more logic, or I want to synchronize more activities around a campaign, and I want to bring up campaign responses. Trigger off other business workflow, but it's happening real time instead of just that kind of background polling process. Marketo is a great example for it because it does have these webhooks are right in the admin toolkit, so it's not going out and writing JavaScript, it's not writing Munchkin code, it's really all UI driven. And on the same side of Scribe's all UI driven to create those logical mappings, create your workflow, and then you can expose it to your Marketo users. So it's a really cool way that now I might have 4 or 5 different campaigns in Marketo that are feeding into this one webhook. I don't have to build 4 or 5 different integrations. It's going to trigger off the same set of logic in CRM and Scribe every time. It's just lots of different feeders to that point. So I want to bring it up because it's a cool feature of Scribe, but it particularly works well with the Marketo and CRM examples because there's some really easy ways to get into that events-driven integration where you get more of that real time and you get a lot more kind of bang for your buck with that integration approach.
Okay.
All right, so the last thing I wanted to hit here is, as things are running, you're going to see different execution types. I'm going to see things that work. I'm going to see things that don't work. Grab a different block here. So as they run, you're going to see different records that are being processed. If I had any kind of failures, so you can see I've got errors here, I've got the ability, I can reprocess those records through our cloud, which is another really handy thing because with integration, without fail, something's going to come in that's going to break the integration. Someone inside of Dynamics created a new required field on the lead and never told anybody. So suddenly, lead stops syncing because it's not being mapped to the integration. So what you want to be able to do is come into a thing like this, map that field real quick, go back to anything that's failed, and just with one click reprocess them. You don't want to have to go back to Marketo, re-trigger the integration, have it be picked up automatically. It just creates a lot more work that you'd have to do to get that thing to fall into a native sync. Versus something like this, you have a lot more granular control. I can just hit a button and make that happen. Anything that fails throughout here, so if I had that example I brought up, you're going to get an email from Scribe telling you, hey, the lead sync has failed, here's the errors. One of the cool things with our UI is, I happen to be on a laptop doing this today, but it's a responsive UI. So if I wanted to look at this from a different standpoint, I can go through and I can say, okay, what I'm going to look at through here, I can emulate, here's a phone. So this is what Scribe would look like on my iPhone. So I can navigate around, I can click through, I can see executions, I can see that different pieces of data. So I have the ability to be a lot more dynamic. If I get that phone call, it's like, hey, we haven't any lead syncs within the last couple of days, and I'm sitting out at lunch, I can look into it real quick and say, yep, it just looks like it was 2 of them that failed. The website was in the phone number field, so it choked, so I'll fix that after. You could also see that and say, oh, shoot, someone changed the password and everything's failing, so I'm going to stop what I'm doing. I'm going to go take care of that real quick and then get back to what I was doing before. So it gives you the ability to kind of give it that sniff test. Like how important is this for me to tackle right this second versus can it wait until I'm kind of done the current task at hand? So it gives you a lot more dynamic capabilities versus having a VPN to an on-prem server to check out those integrated workflows. A lot more dynamic nature there.
Quick question. So if you go back to execution history, I'm guessing that that I is just give you more information on the error.
On the run itself, so it tells you why you got the individual error. Let me open up a different group here, so to show you more of a real, like a row failure. So you can see here, I've got these completed with errors. This is where I ran a bunch of data, but a bunch of it didn't work. If I look at that, it actually will show me in another UI exactly the error details. So it'll show you the record that was processed, the reason why it didn't make it. This is another place where if it's these granular problems, I can say, you know what, these 3 are going to work if I retry them. So reprocess just those 3 records. So there's another view that you can kind of get into to see all that detail, all that management, everything kind of surfaces itself up. And it's just basically what we're doing here. Whatever that endpoint said, we're going to just copy paste back to you. So there's no guesswork. The really cool thing is because we do that, we have a direct tie. We have this really nice success community where we have a link here that will just automatically go through and search the community for the error that you found. So I can see here some different places where I might be able to figure that out. The other thing that's nice is like with a Dynamics, with a Marketo, if there's an error, I can take it outside of Scribe and I can just Google it. And most likely someone else, whether writing custom code or from other integrations, has bumped into it. And I can say, oh, there we go. I know the answer now. So there's some cool capabilities there just around, again, figuring things out when you haven't run into these problems in the past.
Okay, but I guess to piggyback off of that, how far does your support go? Is it just on the Scribe tool, or since you are syncing with Marketo, if we go with this product, will we be able to get support from you on this?
What we usually do, so when you have, let's say you get an error, and we've done some troubleshooting. It's like, okay, this is not a data problem. There's just something wrong. There's something wrong in how we're feeding the data to Marketo. What our teams will usually do is we'll be able to do the diagnostics and say, okay, everything that happens from the Scribe standpoint is working. We make the right call, the data looks good, it passes off to the API in the way the API expects, and then the API misbehaves. We'll generally speaking, either hand it off if you guys are comfortable saying, okay, this is exactly the problem, so we can go to Marketo with that. But we also will like to stay involved. So we can also make sure that we can get on joint calls. We can say, hey guys, this is what's happening. We trace it down. The Marketo teams are pretty great as far as working with us on the support standpoint. We've done a lot of work with their developers in the past. So that organization in general is a good one. Dynamics, you guys, are you on-prem or are you hosted Dynamics?
We're on-prem.
Okay, so like for that instance, most likely it would end up we'd work with you guys directly for your IT staff and the CRM support staff. If it became a problem where it said, again, we're writing data the right way, through the SDK says we have to do it with X, Y, and Z, and we're doing that, we'd team up with you guys to go open up a case with Microsoft, and we'd supply you all the information you need, and again, be generally available to jump on when we need to. So we have different levels. We have L1, L2, and L3 support, which can go through and make sure they give you all the help you need, give you the details you need to keep moving forward. And we try not to, we try very hard not to say, yep, the problem's with Marketo, go, good luck. We do have a pretty good commitment to making sure that you guys are going to be successful with this integration. And if there's problems that come up that we can't address, we'll work with the teams appropriately to get the answers.
Okay.
So the very last thing I want to highlight is just, we talk about a bit of like, CRM, Marketo. We have other access, things like MySQL. We have a whole marketplace of connectivity. So this is where, as you guys, if you look at this from like Nando's standpoint, from a more of a platform approach, this is going to be a place where, as you guys bring in different systems to the enterprise, as you make changes, you can come out here and see all the different connectivity that we've got. It's things that are like named. If you have, Shopify, we have a Shopify connector. We've got other things like SQL Server and ODBC, some very baseline technologies, and then generic REST connectivity. So if there's a REST endpoint you want to just call into to make one simple call, we have the ability to do that much more generically. So we have a pretty big marketplace. We are adding stuff to this all the time. So this is more that more platform approach, where if you want to you have one tool to solve many tasks, that's where this marketplace and some of the capabilities we have come in.
Do you have any Trimble products or Infor products?
We don't have Trimble. We've done some Infor before. I don't think we have anything in our marketplace. One of the things we've got,
we have Lawson and Infinium here.
One of the things we've got, these connectors. So all these guys here, these are the ones that like Scribe's built, or we've contracted with third parties to put out in the marketplace to either, you see a little dollar sign. Some of them are cost, some of them are free. But what we also have is we have an SDK. This is where other people build connectivity. So this is where we may not have something in the marketplace, but people have built connectors to it before. I know I've seen Infor CRM as a connector that showed up in there, and some other Infor products. But this is another place where if there's an endpoint that you don't see in that list and you can't get access to it via SQL or some other technology connector, like the REST APIs, then we can use this to build a connector out. And that would be something that could be deployed to Sunshine State, to that one organization. So you'd have access to it, can work with it going forward, and then just keep working on it. And that's something where your teams could also. This is all public, so it's the same SDK we use internally to build our connectors. We make publicly accessible. So if you guys wanted to build connectivity, if you wanted to build out more endpoint applications as things change, you can build them through the SDK and just plug it right into Scribe and start using those different endpoints without having to do a lot of work from our standpoint. As far as certification or security review, there's ways to just basically deploy and run within minutes.
Gotcha. And do you guys do some custom development? Like, if it's not in, like you said, if it's not a connector that's not in your marketplace?
We generally go through partners. So we have a couple of good developer partners who will contract into projects to do that kind of work. So we have guys that we've used and trusted for years. We don't do a lot of that internally in-house, just because we're spending most of our dev cycles on core platform. So adding more big features to the product. But we do have people that we know and trust that we'll bring in and scope and help work on the details.
Okay.
So that's kind of what I wanted to go through for it's a bit of a high level demo. There's a lot of nuanced details we can get into, but hopefully that's just enough to kind of give you a taste of what the product looks like, some of the different things that it can do, and hopefully a little bit of the use cases that you guys might actually have with the Marketo CRM sync.
Yeah. So I guess my questions are, one is, we feel like we kind of got burned by Marketo where they basically sold us a connector that doesn't work for us. Like, basically it doesn't do everything we thought it could do. So is there any way, do you guys basically will allow us to test test it basically, like to make sure that the connector is going to do what it says, what you guys say it's going to do, basically? Test it with our current dev or our sandbox.
Yeah, we have 2-week trials that I can send you a link to that trial when we're done here, and if you want to get one of those trials going, it'll basically walk you through the steps of what you need to do in terms of establishing connections and building a solution map and that kind of stuff. So I mean, there's definitely some things that you guys can work within the trial.
Okay. And if we're evaluating, are you guys available to help us with the connection, or we're totally on our own?
Well, yeah, I mean, to some extent, we're not going to let you bang your head against the wall. But it's pretty straightforward stuff. You should be able, it will walk you through that. If you get to a point where something's not working as you would expect it to, then yeah, you can always reach out to me directly and we could take a look at it.
Okay. And I guess my other question is, pricing. So
Yeah, and Brendan, I don't know if you want to go back to the slides.
Yeah, I can do that.
And because I put a couple of subscription packages in here. This is kind of the base package, the starter package. This package gives you your production orgs, your sandbox, up to 5 connections. So Marketo's going to take one of those connections, and so is CRM. So it gives you a little bit of a cushion to add in if you wanted to add in, Trumbull or M4 or whatever. Again, some of those third-party stuff might have an additional cost, but for what you're looking to do, that you got that little bit of a cushion. This has the real-time integration that Brendan just demonstrated for you, and it also includes all of your support, your level 1 training. We don't count the number of users. We don't count the number of transactions. It's this is meant to be kind of like an all-inclusive, so you don't get another gotcha down the road saying, well, now I got to buy this and now I got to buy that. So it's really meant to be the one price to cover everything. You also notice, like towards the bottom of this slide, you get some increased SLA response for severity 1 type issues, production down issues, and then we're going to come alongside you and do some design reviews, and out of those reviews you can expect kind of like a blessed project plan, or a project plan that allows you to build out a good foundation with the tools, so you're on the right path to integration. And then those, we include above and beyond support, we include specific consulting type hours annually within the subscription. So if you needed to pull somebody in, let's say you wanted to maybe start a path at looking at Trumbull or something else, I mean, you could use hours around that. Or maybe you have a real heavy deadline on a specific requirement coming in from the business, and you want to bring us in, you can use those hours as you need.
Okay.
So this kind of the package. The next one is similar. It's just it has a lot more connections involved. It also has some other added components. This is more of what I would kind of talk to Nando about, in terms of if you were looking to make this your platform standard. So if you're looking at an integration platform as a service, this really kind of encompasses more of what might be required from an enterprise perspective in that case.
Gotcha. Yeah. All right. So, quick question. If you go back to the previous slide, the standard one.
Yep.
If we choose, so basically, if we look at the 5 individual application connections, so per each one of those individual application connections, we get 3 development sandbox and a production organization, or is it like? I'm trying to understand. So if we have Marketo as one of those 5, and let's say we add N4. With N4, do we get 3 development sandboxes, or does it take up one of those?
Yeah, that's a great question. I get that question a lot because it's kind of confusing. So when we talk about connections, we're not counting anything in terms of like the development connections. We're we're only counting the production connections. So you would use those development environments as you see fit. You know, some people use them as a dev test, UAT, and QA type environment, which you could, you know, you can do it that way. You could, if you wanted to make, okay, this is my Marketo sandbox and this is my Enforce sandbox, you could do it that way, or you could, you know, provision that all within one test environment. It's really a kind of a preference thing in terms of how you guys, you know, build out your solutions.
Okay. So we would just get one production organization for the whole subscription, or for Marketo, and then one for M4 for
yeah. So this is a Scribe production organization. So all of your integrations will be managed within the production org.
I'll remember, because we can break it down into different companies, from what I remember, or different groups or departments, whatever you wanted to call it.
Yeah, different
exactly.
tenant or whatever. Yeah.
Okay. All right, understood. Okay. Eric or Marmek, do you have any questions?
I'm good.
All right, good. I guess
I'm good
the
as
next.
well.
All right, good.
No
Thank you,
problem.
Marmek.
Thanks.
I guess the next steps are, if you can send us the slide deck, that'd be fantastic. The link for the demo trial, and then this recording as well. And then what we'll do is, I'm gonna try and get this presentation in front of my boss so we can go through it, and then based on availability next week, I'll see if I can set up something with Marketo, just so we're all on the same page as to which direction we're going in. It looks like your product will be, will work for us. I just have to make sure it's in line with Marketo as well as our executive team. So.
Yeah, and yeah, let us know what kind of feedback you get, and if we need to, do anything deeper than this, we can most certainly schedule that later. Typically, what Brendan just kind of demonstrated usually is sufficient. But if you want to have additional conversations, we're more than happy to do that.
Yeah, and I'll reach out to Nanda, and I'll see if he can get on a call with you guys, because if he sees this as a benefit or something that we need, and might need the professional package, just so we're not kind of doing this twice, kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. All right, good. So if you could just reach out to me early next week, like Monday or Tuesday, and I'll give you an answer as to what direction we're going in, and then what the next steps are, so we can schedule something for next week.
Perfect. I'll work on getting the collateral over to you right now, and then I'll reach out to you Monday afternoon.
Sounds fantastic. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.